Good morning. Thank you for being here. It is my pleasure to present this work. I will partner in the presentation with Deidre Borrego from J.D. Power and Associates, who is in charge of presenting and delivering modeling solutions for J.D. Power to clients. We are going to present what we consider to be a remarkable marketing science success story. But then, before the presentation, let's share with you some comments from the founder of J.D. Power.
Hello, I'm Dave Power, founder of J.D. Power and Associates. I am pleased that our PIN incentive planning system has been selected as one of the 4 finalists of the prestigious Practice Prize of the Informed Society on Marketing Science. As competition in the automobile industry gets increasingly intense, the pursuit of efficiencies and marketing optimization become crucial for growth and survival. The incentive planning system, developed by PIN's Marketing Science Group, has substantially enriched the solutions we offer to our clients. Combining our real-time new vehicle transaction data with the PIN incentive planning system has revolutionized the way the automotive industry is using marketing information. It has fundamentally changed the practices of most of the major automobile manufacturers in the areas of pricing and promotions. Some manufacturers organize new departments to take advantage of these new capabilities. Evidence shows that some companies that have adopted the system have experienced efficiency gains in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. Better and more timely decisions enabled by the incentive planning system have been instrumental in keeping the automobile industry's sales and capacity utilization at high levels during the 2001 recession. In fact, sources credit the swift response of the automobile industry to the tragic events of 9/11 for the rapid recovery of the U.S. economy. The McGraw-Hill companies have identified the Power Information Network and its innovative solutions as critical assets for the future growth of J.D. Power. We are very pleased with our Marketing Science Group, which is responsible for developing many innovations, including the incentive planning system. It has been a rewarding success story for J.D. Power and Associates, and most of all, our clients.
First of all, good morning. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. From an agenda standpoint, we're going to start with some background about the automotive industry, specifically about why there was such a need for better decision-making tools. We'll talk about our incentive planning models, focusing on the data that we utilize, the methodology, as well as their evolution over time since inception. We'll share with you a case study that's representative of the work that we do with our clients, and we'll also talk about the impact to our industry. Along the way, we have some testimonials from key clients that will give you their perspective of how this has impacted the way that they do business. If we look back to 2001, a pivotal year for the automotive industry, we see that a number of key issues were coming to a head. First and foremost, the impact of high fixed and legacy costs. Manufacturers' profits are significantly impacted by their degrees of capacity utilization. In addition to the high costs of plant and equipment, union agreements have placed further restrictions on their ability to reduce production. In the case of slowing down a production line, an idled worker might still receive 95% of their wages. In addition, pension and retirement costs make it more difficult for manufacturers to respond quickly to changes in demand. In addition, there was increased competition from quote-unquote foreign competitors continuing to add to the already high levels of global capacity. And the very long product development cycles, which is typically 5 years plus in the automotive industry, again made it very difficult to respond quickly to softening of demand. Hence, in the short term, the only tool for manufacturers to really use is price promotions. Again, hearkening back to 2001, we also see a recession looming on the horizon. All of these combined place significant pressure on automakers' profit. This interaction is probably best described by the quote from Bob Eaton that likens the disparity between global capacity and demand to the perfect storm brewing for the automotive industry. To give you an idea of the size and complexity of this area for the automakers, on an annual basis, they spend $45 billion on price promotions, which I'm sure you will find to be a very staggering sum of money. However, given the profit implications that I mentioned, it often makes sense to make these expenditures rather than hurt profits. In addition, manufacturers have multiple alternatives at their disposal from a price promotion standpoint. There might be customer cash programs. There are special or subvened APR programs. There might be dealer cash programs, which are not made known to the general public, but are available for dealers to use as a tool. And there are also various types of lease support that might be offered. In addition, there's the effect of competitive activities. A competitor might be launching a new product, for example, or they might be adopting more aggressive policies of their own. There are different consumer preferences and price sensitivities that vary by local region and market. For example, in the Northeast area of the country, we typically see a higher propensity towards leasing vehicles. And there was also limited reliable information and no analytical tools available to assist automakers in identifying and implementing the most effective and efficient programs. What this all meant was that this was an area of significant pain for our clients, an area where we could have an immediate impact on a very visible and crucial part of their business. A model, particularly in this industry, needs to address many different dimensions. First of all, as I mentioned, there's the differential effects of alternative price programs, as well as by local market area and region. There are competitive effects. And in addition, a model needs to recognize the very complex process that consumers go through when they acquire a new vehicle, involving multiple decision points along the way. A consumer who sets out to acquire a new vehicle has to answer several key questions for themselves, including what type of product do I want? Is it an SUV? Is it a minivan? How do I want to acquire this vehicle? Shall I finance it? Or perhaps at this stage of my life, it makes more sense to lease this vehicle. And of all of the available programs, what makes the most sense for me? Would I prefer more cash so that I can have assistance on the down payment? Or would I prefer a lower finance rate over the term of that acquisition? But finally, a model needs to enable the determination of program cost and efficiency so that this can be compared to their client's overall objectives and so that the best decision can be implemented. I'm going to share with you the information that we collect that is a key input into the model. We're fortunate enough to have access to new vehicle sales transaction data, and I'll show you how this works. Basically, when a customer goes to purchase a new vehicle, that information is entered into the selling dealer's internal management software program. J.D. Power has formed a cooperative agreement with dealers whereby they allow us to access this information gratis in exchange for access to reports so that they can benchmark their performance versus their market. On a nightly basis, we extract information directly from the dealer's management systems. This information is cleansed and compiled and then input into our core database, which then provides us with our platform to conduct modeling and analysis, as well as, very importantly, a feedback mechanism to be able to measure actual performance versus predicted results and formulate alternative tactics. But to give you an idea of the breadth of the information that we have, let me just share with you that right now we have over 10,000 dealerships in the United States who are providing this information to us. That translates into over 15 million transactions annually for both new and used vehicles. And for each of those transactions, we collect over 250 different fields of information, which provides us with very rich vehicle, customer, dealer, and financial attributes. Now I'll turn it back over to Jorge, who will share with you how we use this information in creating the models.
Thank you, Irina. We are using 3 key inputs for our models. And those 3 key inputs inform the utility functions of the consumer. And those are marketing variables, product characteristics, and consumer characteristics. In terms of marketing variables, we have ample information about pricing and promotions in the sales transaction that Didra referred to. But in addition to that, we expand the details with another database assembled at JD Power, which collects all the details of the pricing promotion programs offered by manufacturers to consumers and dealers. In terms of consumer characteristics, they include past behavior that is revealed from, for example, the car the consumer traded in, as well as demographics. Some of the demographics are included in the sales transactions, and some are appended from census data that is linked to the transactions at the block group level. Getting to the structure of the model, we are using a nested logit to account for the multiple decisions, product choice, and transaction type choice. Transaction type choice include the choice of acquisition type, purchase versus lease, the decision about the promotional program, for example, rebate or APR, and the choice of a term for financing or leasing, for example, 36 months, 60 months, and so on. I will skip the details of the netted logit formulation that all of you are very well aware of. I will just comment that in the upper nest, we have product-specific intercepts, and in the lower nest, transaction type-specific intercepts. We handle heterogeneity through a hierarchical Bayes approach to estimate parameters at the local market level. The priors are assumed to be distributed multivariate normal around a national mean and covariance. In turn, those national mean and covariance are assumed to be distributed multivariate normal and inverse Wishart, respectively. These models are estimated via Markov chain Monte Carlo methods. I will show you two examples of those parameter estimates. This example is about monthly payment, the coefficient for monthly payment for 60 months financing programs. As you will see, in all the markets, the coefficient it is in the right range in terms of sign, but there's not too much variation across markets. Compare that with rebates across the same markets in the same product category, which is entry SUVs. There is much more variation. That has implications in terms of how manufacturers may approach the pricing and planning process. There may not be enough variation to justify customization of programs for financing at the local market level, but there will seem to be enough variation to justify customization for rebates. In addition to the models, we have a graphical user interface with several capabilities. The typical capability for what-if scenario analysis. In addition to that, we have the capability to generate in batch a massive set of scenarios under competitive assumptions made by the user. This is an example of that. It is for, actually, this vehicle X is a mid-size SUV. And what we are plotting there is different alternative promotion programs in terms of two dimensions, incremental volume and cost. That allows the user to identify an efficiency frontier. Again, related to the underlying assumptions about the competitive environment. In addition to that, we have an optimization module, which is very efficient. Now, we didn't start here. This was a long learning process. We started more simply, just dealing with the choice decision of product. We were using multinomial Logit, and heterogeneity was handled through latent class. The need to account for the transaction type decision as well moved us to adopt nested Logit, and we moved to random coefficients to have a more flexible way to account for unobserved heterogeneity. Further, a long time, the need to provide estimates at a finer level of detail, particularly for local markets, pushed us to move into hierarchical Bayes. At the same time, we continue expanding the type of program that we accounted for. Additional capabilities were developed, as I mentioned, a batch scenario generator and an optimization module. At the same time, the penetration of the system in the industry grew from 15% to 80%, and this percent is the share of US automobile sales accounted by automakers using the incentive planning system. Deidre will show you some examples.
Given the radical departure that this approach to price promotions was within our industry, it's not surprising that one of our major clients hired Booz Allen Hamilton to conduct an independent validation of the system and the underlying models. In 2 studies, Booz Allen Hamilton not only attested to the validity of the model, but also to the significant potential for savings, which you can see in this example was $250 to $900 million across all vehicles for this automaker. The quotes that you see here are actual verbatims from Booz Allen Hamilton's report. And for those of you who might be in a line of work similar to ours, you know that it's actually very rare where another consultant will give you this type of glowing feedback. But more importantly, here's what our client had to say.
And to have a joint error of less than 0.1% is a pretty good model. Booz Allen Hamilton was brought in. They did a couple of independent validations. It was deemed an expensive enough project that a third party was brought in to do the validation, just because they were looking for a more in-depth analysis. And a number of historical analyses were done, essentially taking the model gets updated every month, so you can actually go back and you could take the CD from October of 2000, load it up and see if it successfully forecasted November of 2000. And they did that, I think, through most of the months of 2000 and possibly 2001. And the model is consistently, for the majority of vehicles, better than 95%.
This work has also deepened our relationship with our clients. In the case of Chrysler, which is representative of a lot of our relationships, we now have a full-time modeling consultant on site 5 days a week. We work with the marketing operations group, running scenarios and analyzing the impact of new competitive programs, as well as fine-tuning existing programs to achieve monthly targets. And also with the corporate economist's office, using the batch scenario generator that Jorge mentioned to run numerous scenarios across their entire vehicle portfolio, looking for the most efficient programs, and summarizing that information so that it can be taken directly to the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Vice President of Marketing every month before programs are approved. Now I will walk you through a case study. Again, this is representative of the type of work that we do with our clients. In any given month, we might have hundreds of similar scenarios we're working on across our client base. But as background, the client uses the incentive planning system to review all of the programs for all of their vehicles on a monthly basis. In this particular case, the issue was the client wanted us to help them evaluate the current program and determine if there were more efficient alternatives, and if so, what exactly were those alternatives. The action was that we took the current program and ran that through the batch scenario generator against multiple alternatives to look for more efficient programs. What you can see here is that we were indeed able to find a more effective program. The actual program is the red dot, and the blue dot is the proposed program that we came back with, which was actually a lower cost per unit as well as higher sales for the OEM. In fact, it was $439 less per vehicle, and I'll walk you through the total savings from this program. The two programs were similar, with the major difference being in the proposed program, we proposed a much more attractive APR, 0% up to 60 months and 2.9% at 72 months, and also eliminated the captive cash. Captive cash is essentially an additional promotion that is available to consumers who opt to finance or lease their vehicle through the manufacturer's finance arm. What we can see here is essentially we were able to shift money to the APR by reducing the spend in the captive cash for an average cost per unit of $3,498 versus $3,937. What this illustrates is that we were able to capitalize on underlying consumer preferences for different transaction types. What essentially happened here was that even though there was a very attractive APR program, which you can see is more expensive for the automotive manufacturer, more consumers still opted to take the rebate. And together, this all balanced out into a more effective overall program. Now I'll turn it back over to Jorge to talk about the impact to the industry.
The question is whether this system is limited to affect the industry in a zero-sum game, meaning just manufacturers competing for the same pie and just shifting share from one to the other. We have evidence to show that efficiencies gained through this system has helped the industry to sustain annual volume of sales around 17 million units compared to the previous historical average of 15 million. Furthermore, this volume that was not believed to be sustainable at the beginning was resilient to the 2001 recession through better and more dynamic planning in pricing and promotion by manufacturers. Additionally, in addition to raise the mean, we shrank the variance in capacity utilization, which is a key contributor to profitability. The historical average for the standard deviation of capacity utilization was 5.5. After the adoption of the incentive planning system in the industry, the volatility, the standard deviation, on average has been 2.4.
I think the bigger point, though, is that the incentives overall by GM, by Ford, and Chrysler played a much bigger role than they had in previous recessions. Historically, when the U.S. entered a recession, industry sales would fall probably 15 to 25% peak to trough, depending on how serious the recession was. In the 2001 recession, sales only fell about 4 or 5%, which was very unusual historically. The GM Keep America Rolling program and the reaction to that program by Ford, Chrysler, and others really, I think, did a lot to keep the industry volumes up during the course of the recession at not tremendous cost to the companies. And we were also doing lots of incentives with better knowledge of what the effect of those programs would be.
The impact has also extended into other areas within our clients as well. As Dave Power mentioned, some manufacturers have organized all new departments around the new analytical systems. It's also led to a more disciplined and thorough process to deal with issues that extend beyond pricing and promotion, such as vehicle distribution and configuration. And it's also spurred interest in analytics for other decision areas. In addition, the models provide us with a platform to extend into other areas utilizing a consistent underlying methodology. A few of these areas are noted here. Marketing mix models that include advertising along with pricing and promotions to provide a more true return on overall marketing investment for clients. Product planning by opening the product into attributes and capturing substitution patterns across the whole industry. And pricing optimization for financial institutions. In addition, automakers fundamentally changed their pricing and promotion planning. Some of the key learnings are that different ways to structure a price promotion may lead to substantially different effects. It's not just having the lowest price. Preferences for transaction types have a significant effect on consumer response to price promotions, as we saw in the case study that we just went through. And all those sensitivities and preferences also vary across regions and markets. And finally, diminishing returns can affect different program types at different levels, which also varies across markets. I'll share with you another case study, another testimonial from our client that sums this up.
The model has evolved such that the corporation now basically uses the model to guide our proposals to senior management for incentive and pricing planning on a month-to-month basis. The reports that we do, we go over in detail with the people in incentive planning in the sales organization, the sales planning organization. And we also review pretty much in summary on a monthly basis with the Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing. We actually developed it internally, an estimate of an efficiency frontier on how efficient you can possibly be in your incentive programs. And then management makes a choice, hopefully staying on the frontier, but we can choose to either go for volume or go for profitability or low cost with a particular incentive program on a particular model. And I mean, it's kind of a management decision as long as you can stay on or near the frontier. We have been using the distance from the frontier where we start and then how close we can get to the frontier over time. In the last full year that we've been running the model in sort of batch mode to do all our major models, we actually estimated that we probably saved $500 million. So we think the savings that we've generated the company by a better calculation of where our incentive programs will go relative to what others in the market are doing is probably generated very large savings.
Those of you who deal with clients, as I do, know that it's actually very rare for a client to actually share with you their savings. And for our client to do this testimonial for us and say that $500 million is their estimate really is a testament to the working relationship that we've developed working closely with them to develop these models. Now, Chrysler mentioned that they report annual gains of $500 million. If we look across all of the clients that we're working with, we think that combined efficiency gains for automotive manufacturers using this tool are at about $2 billion. Again, a very substantial impact on our clients' business. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for a very, very enlightening presentation, both from a perspective of the steps in the model and the analytical components, as well as from the perspective of the usability and the impact on your clients. We will have a few questions, and I'll start with the following. You've done a nice job at laying out the over time evolution of the various modeling steps, I believe, between 2001 and present. And you've looked at that primarily from a perspective of the evolution in the analytics, sort of increasingly more sophisticated analytics. The question is one of where do you feel the greatest impact has been from a client benefit perspective as opposed to an analytical sophistication perspective. Where in this value chain that you have summarized do you feel the client extracts the most value out of the process?
Well, we think that there are two key areas. And the first was about the learning process of the client into the different effects that they may have by structuring the same price discount, in different ways. And clients were remarkably surprised about the variation that we showed in that example of output from the batch scenario generator in terms of how inefficient they could be. And we traced how far away from the efficient frontier pretty much manufacturers have been in a long time, and pretty much we found that they are much closer to the efficient frontier consistently now. The second area was a more disciplined process internally to make those decisions. Having those systems in place and so on also resulted in organizing departments around that, developing expertise, and then it is not acceptable now to make multi-billion decisions just by guesswork.
I would just add to that it really took a lot of the emotion out of the decision-making process. The automotive industry, I suppose, like many others, can be very emotional, and the fact that car dealers are independent franchisees makes that interaction with the manufacturer very tense at times. Many times manufacturers used to respond to emotional pleas from the field that they absolutely had to drop price. Now we offer them a much more disciplined approach as well as the means to measure that and improve it over time.
Thank you.
Building on that last point that you were just discussing, we wondered if you could describe the way people inside the organization interact with this system. You talked about having embedded experts, but I wonder if you could talk about it moving beyond to the dealers, to distribution systems, to production planning. Can you just, how has this penetrated the organization and their activities?
Well, our initial work is typically with the group that's in charge of handling the variable marketing budget. Our on-site person usually is involved in all of the meetings. There's a monthly meeting to review what happened the prior month, as well as to talk about any issues that might be looming on the horizon. For example, we're getting ready to launch a new model, but we have a tremendous supply of the old one. What do we need to do? Based upon those types of issues that come up, we will go back and run different types of scenarios through the system, perhaps using the batch scenario generator. And then we basically will help synthesize that down, working in partnership with our day-to-day contacts to make sure that it fits into the overall environment of that particular manufacturer, and so that information can be presented in a way that melds it with the other proposals they might be taking forward. Once that happens, it's communicated out to the field organization, who communicates that out to the dealer team. And then often we might be called in because the dealers might think some of it might seem counterintuitive. For example, enriching an APR program, we might be called in to explain that and provide more detail.
The first two questions have been about pretty short-term planning cycles. I want to ask you a question about a longer-term planning cycle, and the idea that car buyers may start to become trained to expect certain things, and this incentive work that's been going on the last few years may have conditioned them to change their buying patterns, change their consideration sets. And you know, the whole thing may start to run out of steam at some point if you hit a wall. Can you talk about the sort of dynamic nature of the consumer?
Let me start. That is a very interesting topic about how we may influence consumers by the actions. Number one, typically the recommendations are contain some variation of programs a long time, and those are have found to be more effective than having stale programs that last for 1 quarter or even longer. Variation in a way that is not wouldn't be easily predicted by consumers. Now, in terms of the habituation, in terms of that price sensitivity going up and so on, we have been measuring elasticity for the different type of programs, and those may typically have varied over time, but not necessarily in an upper trend. And we have been measuring those through 5 years already or more. And third, and I read comment that we know that GM is not in the best position now. I'm not saying that it's in distress, but it's not a happy camper, let's say. But we have information that show that GM's share was in a dive before they adopted a more disciplined process to pricing and promotion planning. After adopting that process, its share either stabilized or grew for about 3 years. For reasons that I could explain better off the record, the share returned to go down at the end of 2004. However, doing just a naive extrapolation of the trend in which GM was before would give us market share for GM 2 percentage points lower than it is now. Even we don't know we don't know where GM would have been had it not adopted a more disciplined and way to approach these decisions.
In addition, if I could just add to that, the work that we're doing is also expanding into other areas of how the manufacturers do business. Entering into the incentive arena, again, which is such a visible and high impact area, allowed us to make an immediate difference. And as we built up that credibility over time, they're now much more willing to look at us to use similar solutions in other areas, such as the overall marketing mix and longer term product planning. So what they can do is make sure that they have the right products that they're developing further down the line and can avoid some of the